Refining and Petrochemicals World Conference 2020. We begin with our first session for today on technology. As our session chair, we have Mr. C.J. Iyer, former Executive Director, BPCL Mumbai Refinery. Mr. Iyer has graduated in Chemical Engineering from IIT Varanasi in the year 1983. He has completed his diploma in Systems Management from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, Mumbai. He has worked for 36 years in various functions in Mumbai Refinery of Bharat Petroleum Corporation, including process and project technology, process safety, energy and environment, scheduling and blending, quality assurance, plant operations, as well as Executive Assistant to Director Refineries. He has led the Mumbai Refinery team to achieve various Business Excellence Awards at a national level. From 2017 till his superannuation from service in November 2019, he worked as Executive Director in charge of Mumbai Refinery, overseeing the entire refinery operations. Requesting Mr. Iyer to join us. Also joining us this afternoon is Mr. Amit Shrivastava, Director, Bentley Systems, who will be speaking to us on creating, managing, and leveraging digital twins. May I request you to join us on the dais? Also joining us this afternoon, we have Mr. C.V. Natarajan, Vice President Marketing, Trilok Corporation. And he will be speaking on HIGEE technology for efficient process intensification. May I request you to please join us on the dais? And now I hand over to Mr. C.J. Iyer.
Hello. I think we're running short of time, and I just like to make one opening remark that in the last 18 months of my career, I spent a lot of time on digitalization from visioning to actual execution. So I'm happy to be part of this team, and let me put one thing on the table which I think was also mentioned by the Reliance speaker. We really don't know the huge fiscal and non-fiscal benefits of digitalization from end to end. So I think without much ado, we should start off with the digital twin concept, and then we could hear up on the HIGEE. Limited point is there's money on the table to be picked up, and as people who have talked before the tea break, today's tough competitive times where every cent you need to extract, we need to look at opportunities to squeeze the refining assets and put value on the table. That's all I'd like to say now. Let's hear from the speakers, and then we'll try and summarize at the end, given the time, what exactly we need to do. Digital twin concept has been talked about both at the equipment level, that is say the pump level, the compressor level, but we need to think big. We need to talk about the entire refinery, the digital twin. We haven't reached that stage, I think, in the entire country. And let's hear from the speakers of the potentials from a technological perspective. And then each one of us need to put hand on the table and put our aspiration, what we want to do. But finally, it will give clearly a top line and a bottom line plus HSSE. Health, safety, security, environment. I think we should go ahead and ask the first speaker and listen from him. Go ahead, sir. What's the timing like? The top time has been told. The organizers, what's the time limit? 20 minutes. We try to restrict to 20 minutes. It's a pretty, not a very
I'll try my best. So good afternoon. So, okay, you guys can see it back. So what I'm going to talk about is digital twin, but I thought I should clear some air when we talk about Bentley, right? We are not Bentley Nevada. We are not into vibration monitoring. We are a software solution providers. I think that's the first thing which I should clear back around. And what we do is we provide softwares across the complete life cycle of any facility or infrastructure. So it starts with helping you design your facility, help you do in construction, and then operate your facility back. And we basically not only address oil and gas, power, but we are also into infrastructure, we are into road, so road, rail, bridges, offshore, onshore, and around that. And if you need some more details about it, we are at the Expo at A2 booth. We'll invite you to come there and we can talk more in terms of what Bentley does back. And back to the topic of digital twins. So I think the first sessions were very interesting. I think very engaging in terms of what we were talking about visions, how Richard talked about how they are basically implementing the systems, getting value in terms of how they operate, the design build concept of it. But if you see the trend lines on how things have been happening in our industry, we are going through transformation every decade, right? 80s was when we moved from drawing boards to CAD and said all our engineering contents will be created in CAD or 3D models back. And then we started talking automations. You heard that back in the morning session. I won't repeat back. And today we talk about digitalization. Now, if I would have to ask you, everybody would have their own definition when we talk digitalization, right? Somebody would say, if I create a 3D model of an asset, it's as good as having a digital model for me. So McKinsey did a very interesting report about it. They said, when I'm trying to talk about digitalization, there are three basically dimensions to it. One is what level of digital assets you have today. This is all about sensors, it's all about the hardwares, how are you leveraging AI, ML, but more importantly, the second dimension is very important. That is all about using that information which you're creating. For example, if you look at today's, any of our plants, petrochemical plants, we would have anything between 15,000 to 30,000 sensors which are running in our facility today. But how much of that information are we really using? McKinsey said, actually we're using only 1% of that data, which is used for actionable information. Each of everything else which we are creating, it's being created in the big data, but we are not using it from an actionable perspective, and that's very important aspect of it. So how do I use that information to transform my business? How do I use it from an operational efficiency gains perspective? How do I use it from an HSC perspective? That's very important. And the third dimension where they talked about digitalization was how are I basically looking at my current processes? How am I basically changing the processes on how our people work? Can I relook at my work processes today? Can I automate those processes? Think about the manual check sheet which my operator goes around to take the readings. Can I basically digitalize that back? That's the third aspect around it. And then when McKinsey talked about it, they basically benchmarked various industries. So if you look at, I'm not sure it's very much readable, but agriculture and hunting is the lowest, not surprisingly, right? But oil and gas is also not on the peak of that. We have opportunities for all of us in terms of what we can do to improve our digitalization, and Gartner talks about it. It talks about multiple strategy. We heard from Mr. Natarajan in the morning, he talks about digital twins. We heard about AI and ML from him, Mr. Richard on that, and blockchains. So there are multiple technologies which we are all talking in industry today. What I'll do is I'll just focus on digital twin for this session back. Now, is it something which is happening in future? The technology which you're talking about digital twin, is it something which I can use or bring value in 2025 or 2030? No. This is a report from Gartner, and this was published in 31st January 2019. So it's a year-old report. And that report says that 13% of us have already started implementing digital twins. It may be that we are not defining it and saying it's a digital twin, but the purpose and the value we are bringing from that is definitely from that aspect. 62% of us are actually either have a roadmap or are in a process of implementing a digital twin here. So it's not a technology or it's not a trend which will be coming back or we're talking in initial stages. It's happening now, and what's important for all of us here is how do we bring and gain value from that in our industry or in our operations aspect of that. So how do we define a digital twin? Let's try to define that back and then see how can I make a digital twin and then how I can basically leverage that back. So let's go through that process. So a digital twin is a digital representation of your asset. Remember, it could be for a process, it could be for a system or for your whole plant. But that image or a 3D model is not the only thing, it's the foundation of your asset. What's important is your context, your engineering information. What's important is how do I bring information from my IT and OT systems to understand how my asset is performing and able to do predictive analysis around that. How will it behave or what I need to do around it. I think you mentioned very nicely in terms of, we're not talking just prescriptive maintenance, we're looking at how can I predict the behavior of my asset. And that's what digital twin brings value to all of us from that aspect. So very simply defined, it's basically a convergence of engineering technology. This is where your project delivery partners, your design build contractors basically provides you with 3D models, data sheets, drawings, PIN IDs. And then you combine this information with your OT tools. This is where your IoT devices, your IP21, OMPROs, various data historians, how do you bring information from them? And how do you converge again from your work order management systems, your IT systems together? Once I combine this information, I can use it for multiple cases depending on where and what I'm trying to do. Now, as you will hear in industry, digital twin is a word which could be basically focused in terms of where and what I want to do back. So if I'm looking at it from an EPC perspective, I may be focusing on a project digital twin, which is used for designing your facility back. How do I do construction? How do I do construction monitoring aspect of it? And for an owner operator who is operating the plant, we will be talking about performance digital twin. Now they're not two different silos. As your design gets matured, as you do an HOTO and transfer your facility back to an owner operator, that project digital twin is basically matured and used by operations team to create your performance digital twin. Now there are various use cases on what I can do with a digital twin. Gartner in this report was basically saying any of the use case we think about and what's being implemented today in our industry can be classified in these three levels or three buckets to monitor your assets. This is where asset performance management aspect comes in. This is where you are looking at your IoT data, you're looking at your sensors data to understand how your asset is performing. The second aspect is around visualization. This is about converging information from all systems, creating an asset portal where you can navigate to a model, look for all the work orders, look for all your engineering documentation. And the third aspect is simulation. Look at your process simulation or your equipment simulation. And that's not limited to that. Like one of the examples which I would like to talk about here is what Shell is doing in Philadelphia. So they're coming up with an ethane processing plant, ethane cracking unit in Philadelphia. And what they're doing is they're using this digital engineering model to simulate that because that plant is near to the Ohio River. So they want to simulate that if the rainfall has a heavy rainfall in that area, what will it be the impact on my plant? So they're doing basically the whole simulation of the water level increasing in the river. How does it overflows into my plant? What is the contingency plan I have to do around that? That whole level of simulation is also which is a digital twin brings it. And we'll talk about use cases as I move forward, but let's talk about how do I create a twin? Now, we all have some existing plants which are running and maybe we have some greenfield plants, but what it starts with is how do I capture my existing site conditions? And then I leverage the information which I have today coming from my engineering sources to create a twin which converges information coming from my ET and IT systems. So it starts with bringing information from various design applications. It could be coming from a smart plant, a Bentley application, or an Aviva application. And I'm sure people coming from the design side know these are the most commonly used tools when it comes to design creation. So what we do is we use that to create a digital twin. Now, we will have scenarios where information is not in the 3D model. We have structured, unstructured data coming from an Excel spreadsheets or a line list. So how do we bring that information? And what's running on your screen is I could basically import information from your Excel spreadsheets also to help me create a twin. So, for example, for an existing client, one of our users basically said, I do not have all my instrument index. So what I do that? So what we did back was we connected back to the DCS, we brought all the instruments, we brought all the indicators which were there and created a twin which was linked to the work orders management system. So it's not something you are starting from a scratch. We could leverage what you have today in your facility to create a digital twin for your plant back. And so once that's done, I could basically be able to create an asset portal as you see here. So it's just not a pretty picture of a 3D model. It creates your complete plant breakdown structure. So your asset hierarchy, which typically today is only stored in your work order management system or EAM system, is now available on a portal itself. So you could navigate through that. You could look at the 3D model. You can look at your PIN IDs. You can query information directly as a beginning of that. From a project digital twin, I could use it from a perspective of doing construction simulation. I can look at from querying information from a user's perspective. But if I have an existing plant which had been running for now 2 decades, so what do I do around that, where I don't have a 3D model aspect of it? This is where reality modeling comes into picture. So today we all use technologies like drones. We had been using laser scanning. Today we use digital cameras, thermal cameras. So I could basically use these multiple devices to capture my asset condition through an images aspect of that. So here's an example. So this is one of the Siemens test plant. So what Siemens did back, they basically used their skid and used a digital camera to capture images of their skid. So what we did was we captured multiple images of that skid and then processed in our solution called context capture, which allows to create those, process those images to create a 3D model. So this is a 3D model, it's a wire mesh model, which means I can basically bring that back into my engineering design. I can use it for dimensioning, I can use it for detail engineering to take it forward as such. Now, as we all know, what's important is able to have that intelligence to understand I am a butterfly valve, I am a gate valve. And that's where the artificial intelligence and machine learning comes into it. So what we have done back in context capture is we have basically an ML logic built in. So what you can now do is train the system back. So what you're seeing as an example here is I could basically create a window around a valve and say, I'm a butterfly valve, and train the system multiple times. Once I do that, the system will automatically starting identifying all the reality models to classify those items back. For example, this is another test plant from a user where now using those AI ML logics, I'm able to understand what are the various assets. It's not just limited to understanding what type of asset it is. It reads your nameplates if you have them, or if you have a QR code, it reads that information and ties it back to your work order management system. So you're not manually creating a reality model and tagging it back to my design. This whole digital twin is able to automate that process back within the system. Now that I have a foundation ready, how do I use that back? And that's where we'll be able to leverage digital twins. So this is a small video which I'm running back, and what you're seeing here is basically my fleet dashboard. So what you're seeing are the multiple fleets here or multiple plants I have. I'll be able to understand how the assets are performing. I could basically create a dashboard to review in terms of what KPIs we have. I could navigate back to a particular site or a plant. I could look at a mimic and see data coming from my IP21 or sensors in terms of how my particular unit or an asset is working back. I could look at issues, challenges. For example, if you see here, this pump is not performing as per what has been benchmarked around it. So I can directly drill down here within the system itself. So now I'm not moving through silos of information. Like Mr. Narayanan was talking about speed. What importance of able to understand and able to react fast on challenges around it. And that's where the digital twin comes in. So I could basically look at a model now or that specific pump, try to understand what are the various parameters which I'm basically receiving through various sensors. I'll be able to understand in terms of where and what are the related failure modes, how this asset can basically fail. So your asset failure models or your FEMA models, which have been created and managed within your APM solutions, are now displayed directly. So as a user or an operator or a maintenance guy, I'll be able to understand what are the possible failures and what are the basic recommendations given by my team to be able to correct that off. So that's all possible now as a digital twin, where these informations were today in different silos. So it's just not about a 3D model. I can go to a component level view of an equipment in terms of how many components they have. I can look at what are the various inventories or how many parts we have. Are they available in my stock or not, or I need to reorder them back. All these informations is now available to your operators. It's now available to your maintenance team on a finger hand. Now I can directly now use, rather than going into my Meridian or SAP EM systems, I'll be able to look at how many work orders this particular pump has. Because typically when I'm running on a steady state, every equipment may have multiple work orders or MOCs running on. So today now I'll be able to get a snapshot view of how many work orders or MOCs are running for a particular asset, at what stage they are, which can help me to decide in terms of do I combine two MOCs to make one bigger MOC to address the challenges which I'm facing in the industry. Now remember, we created a 3D view of that. So now I can leverage that 3D view from an aspect of a digital twin. So I can look at various monitors in terms of, show me in this facility, are there any alarms which are being raised back? So I can directly go to that dashboard rather than going separately, look at various, query that whole model in terms of which are the facilities which are operating, what are the various alarms which are being raised in my facility back. And right, as you see in the example right now, it shows me that there is two pumps which are basically raising an alarm. So I can select an alarm, that pump directly, and it will tell me what are the various alarms which are being raised. So I can look at my engineering properties, I can look at my operational status, as you are seeing on the right hand side of the screen, your left on the screen back. I would be able to see all related documents about this equipment, which today is stored in various repositories, SharePoint, OpenText, or project-wise. Now this all information is available in single view to our users to be able to leverage the digital twins. So once I have that, I'll be able to understand what are the various failure modes and what assets issues which we are facing on that asset aspect of it. It's just not limited to that. As an operator or a maintenance guy, when I'm looking at a particular alarm, I can acknowledge and raise a work order directly here. So now I'm not shifting from one system to another to be able to do, acknowledge an alarm or create a work order. This whole system manages that whole information directly. And that's not just limited from that aspect. Because I could use a laser scan or a reality model, I could use the same reality model for the similar purposes aspect of it. The other thing which is important is how do I consume that information? Now, it's available on all forms of devices. I could use a laptop, I could use a mobile, or I could use a HoloLens. That's another technology which we all talk about. And here's an example of an HoloLens use of a digital twin. So I can use an HoloLens and say, show me, because I had a work order to work on. So I can say, tell me how do I navigate to that path? And the system will automatically tell you where that issue was, and it helps you to navigate to that. And now I can look at directly through an HoloLens in terms of what are the various objects which are part of that work order. So I could basically navigate through the various BOM objects. It looks at material details. It tells you whether if I'm replacing this component, is it available in my inventory or not? So that whole MRO, the whole inventory management, all is interlinked back directly within the system back. And how do we provide that? Is through a web service called PlantSight. PlantSight basically is a cloud-based services. We have co-developed along with Siemens. It basically allows you to converge information from your ET, IT, and OT systems. Who uses our solutions? So whether you are basically a global executive or a management who wants to focus on how do I reduce risk, how do I ensure my safety and reliability of my plant, Plant site is a solution which can help you to do that. If you're a plant manager who is looking at to optimize your operations, plant site and digital twin helps you to do that. Same is the case when it comes to operators in terms of how do I understand what has changed in my asset, the whole configuration management aspect of that. Plant sites provide you with that insight around it. So does for the plant engineers or the reliability engineers aspect of that around it. To summarize from a time perspective, there are multiple benefits when it comes to creating a digital twins. We all talked about efficiency in the morning, and that's what digital twin brings in. We all talked about how do I reduce the cost, how do I basically grow my revenue. Digital twins, use of digital twin in your plants would help you to achieve that back. And these are the few numbers which our users have been gaining in terms of ROI using Bentley solutions in their projects around it. We'll be happy to talk more in details, and we invite you to come to our booth to talk about that. With that, I'll end up my session. Thank you.